r/NoSleep. The last time I spent the night at an abandoned rest stop. Sometimes, traveling late at night feels like a small adventure, a quiet world, an empty road, and the promise of solitude. This is why I've always preferred driving long distances at night. Less traffic, fewer distractions. Just me, the open road, and the hum of my old sedan. But after last night, I'll never make that choice again. I was driving cross-country to attend my brother's wedding, an 18-hour haul with no stops except for fuel and a quick nap. Around 1:30 a.m., fatigue hit me like a wall, and I decided to pull over at the first rest stop I could find. I passed a few well-lit service areas, but for some reason, I kept driving, telling myself I could push on a little farther. Finally, I saw a faded sign for a rest stop ahead. It looked old, probably abandoned, but I figured it'd be good enough to park for a few hours. I pulled off the highway and followed the cracked asphalt road into the lot. There was a single lamppost flickering weakly, casting a dull yellow light over a few broken-down benches and overflowing trash cans. The building that once housed restrooms and vending machines was boarded up and covered in graffiti. "Perfect," I muttered, parking under the lamppost. It wasn't ideal, but I was too tired to care. I reclined my seat, locked the doors, and let myself drift off to sleep. A sharp thud jolted me awake. I sat up, disoriented. The car clock read 3:17 a.m. The rest stop was deathly quiet, and the weak lamppost was still flickering, casting erratic shadows across the lot. I scanned my surroundings, but there was nothing. Probably a raccoon knocking something over. I laid back down and closed my eyes. Thud thud. This time, it was louder, closer. It wasn't coming from outside the car. It was coming from the roof. My heart pounded as I sat upright. Something, or someone, was on top of the car. I grabbed my phone, but of course, it was dead. I cursed under my breath and looked for something, anything, I could use as a weapon. My hand landed on the tire iron I kept under the passenger seat. Tap. 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 The sound moved from the roof to the driver's side window, a slow, deliberate tapping. I froze, gripping the tire iron so hard my knuckles turned white. The lamppost flickered again, and for a brief moment, I saw it. A pale hand with unnaturally long fingers was pressed against the glass. It moved slowly, leaving streaks of grime as it dragged its fingers downward. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. No response. I mustered the courage to lean closer, trying to get a better look. The lamppost flickered again, and I saw a face peering in, a woman's face, gaunt and hollow, with sunken eyes and a mouth that seemed too wide, stretching into a crooked grin. Her head tilted unnaturally, and she mouthed something I couldn't hear. I screamed and scrambled into the back seat, clutching the tire iron like a lifeline. The woman's grin widened as she began slamming her palm against the window, harder and harder, the glass rattling with each hit. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw open the opposite door and bolted out into the night, my breath fogging in the chilly air. I didn't stop running until I was on the other side of the lot, crouched behind a rusted dumpster. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. The banging stopped. Silence. I peered around the corner of the dumpster, scanning the parking lot. My car was still there, sitting under the flickering lamppost. The windows were intact. No sign of her. Had I imagined it? Was I losing my mind from lack of sleep? I took a cautious step forward. Then I heard it. Crunch. I looked down. There was a single bloody footprint where I had just stepped. And then another. And another. They weren't mine. They were leading to the dumpster. I didn't wait to see what was behind me. I sprinted to my car, jumped in, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I floored it, peeling out of the lot without looking back. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up and I reached a crowded truck stop. I parked near a group of semis, surrounded by people, and finally let myself breathe. When I got out to stretch my legs, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The roof of my car was covered in handprints, smudged and bloody, as if someone had been crawling all over it. And written on the windshield, in streaks of red. "See you next time." The words smeared across my windshield made my blood run cold. I stood there, frozen, staring at them as the morning sun glinted off the crimson streaks. My mind raced with questions. Who, or what, had done this? Was it the woman from the rest stop? How had she managed to follow me? And what did she mean by next time? I wiped the windshield clean with a trembling hand, the blood leaving a faint residue no matter how hard I scrubbed. I felt exposed, even in the middle of a bustling truck stop. People milled about, but none of them seemed to notice me, or the state of my car. It was as if I was invisible, trapped in some horrifying bubble that only I could see. I decided I couldn't stay there. I had to get to my brother's place, put some distance between me and whatever had happened. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and merged back onto the highway. The radio was off, the hum of the tires on the pavement my only companion. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting to see her pale face staring back at me. But the road behind me was empty, stretching endlessly into the horizon. As the hours passed, I began to rationalize. Maybe it was a prank. Some deranged homeless woman could have followed me and scrawled that message while I was asleep. Maybe the handprints and footprints were just dirt and grime, exaggerated by my panic. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself that I was overreacting. By the time I reached my brother's town, I felt almost normal again. His house was warm and inviting, and the sight of my family immediately eased some of the tension I'd been carrying. I told myself I'd imagine the whole thing, or at least parts of it, and resolved not to ruin the mood by bringing it up. That night, after the family dinner, I parked my car on the street outside my brother's house and settled into the guest room. Exhaustion finally caught up with me, and I sank into a deep, dreamless sleep. Until I woke up to a faint tap. 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 My eyes shot open. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat up, straining to hear. The sound was soft and rhythmic, coming from the window. I told myself it was just a tree branch swaying in the wind. But when I turned my head, I saw her. She was standing outside, on the other side of the window. Her face was pressed against the glass, her crooked grin wider than before, her milky white eyes unblinking. Her filthy dress fluttered slightly in the breeze, and her long, black hair draped over her shoulders like a veil. My first instinct was to scream, but no sound came out. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, desperate to call for help, but it wasn't there. It was still in the car. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. She raised her hand and pointed to the front door. I shook my head furiously, mouthing, "No, no, no." Her grin faltered for a moment, and then she vanished. The room was silent again, except for the sound of my ragged breathing. I bolted out of bed, determined to wake my brother and tell him everything. But when I reached the hallway, I froze. The front door was wide open, swaying slightly in the wind. "Chris?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Lila?" No response. I crept down the hallway, my bare feet padding against the wooden floor. The living room was empty, the TV still on, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The dinner table was still set, the remnants of our meal untouched. "Chris?" I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and moved toward the front door, peering outside. The street was eerily quiet, the house is dark. My car sat under the glow of a streetlight, but something about it looked off. As I stepped closer, I saw what it was. The windows were fogged up, as if someone had been breathing heavily inside. And there, written in the condensation on the windshield, were the words, "Let me in." I backed away, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the knife. My instinct screamed at me to run, to leave everything behind and just get out of there. But my family was still inside, or at least I hoped they were. I couldn't abandon them. I turned back toward the house, but the door was no longer open. It was shut tight, the windows dark. "No, no, no," I muttered under my breath, sprinting back to the porch. I twisted the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. I pounded on the door, screaming for my brother, for anyone. Behind me, I heard the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel. I spun around, knife raised, and saw her standing at the edge of the driveway. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and her grin had twisted into something far more sinister. She began walking toward me, slow and deliberate, her bare feet leaving bloody prints on the pavement. I had no choice. I ran. I don't remember much about the next few hours. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing in a field on the outskirts of town. When I finally worked up the courage to go back, the sun was rising. The house was just as I'd left it, except for the door, which now swung open easily under my touch. Inside, everything was as it should be. My brother and his wife were asleep in their room, oblivious to what had happened. I didn't tell them. I didn't tell anyone. That was 3 months ago. I haven't driven at night since, haven't stopped at any rest stops. I sold my car and bought a new one, moved to a new city, changed my phone number. I even started seeing a therapist, though I haven't told her the full story. But last night, as I was locking up my new apartment, I noticed something on the hallway mirror. A single bloody handprint. And scrawled beneath it, in that same jagged script. See you soon.